it was just amazing to read what all that you did and where you went and who you talked to. And it's just reporting that we just don't normally get to see on, in the mainstream media. And it's so sad. I mean, Serbia's destruction as a European country. Just walk us through, what you want to tell us about the horrible destruction of Serbia.
Well, Yugoslavia is very important in my life, but much more important in the history of imperialism.
Yeah.
Now, you see, I don't consider my book exactly an autobiography because I don't consider that I'm the subject. I'm the observer.
Okay.
And I wrote an earlier book, Fool's Crusade, was a history about Yugoslavia. This more tells, because it's more personal all the way through. I'm the observer, but it's history as I'm observing it, and not as looking it up as in the other book. And I was in Yugoslavia already as a student, so I had a familiarity with Yugoslavia that most people certainly didn't have, and so I had the advantage of being able to understand things a little more quickly, and so I recount in this book exactly my own personal experience of Yugoslavia, which I think is interesting because it's an abstraction to most people, and it was really a decisive moment in history because the Yugoslavia was used as an experiment for everything that's come afterwards. That is to say, it was the end of the Soviet Union, and people were thinking, aha, we can have peace. And instead, this whole thing was manipulated. Yugoslavia the tearing apart of Yugoslavia was actually encouraged, and by various, and they use various techniques that keep being used. That is to say, Yugoslavia was a multicultural country, a multinational country, I would say. Now, at the same time that the West is, by talking in favor of globalization, keeps saying how wonderful we should all be together and multicultural. I mean, that was their line. And at the same time, they were actively tearing apart a multicultural country in Europe by sponsoring the right-wing nationalists in Croatia, and who, by the way, often were not living in Croatia because there was a huge diaspora of Croatian fascists who had gone to Germany, Canada, and the United States, and were very active in supporting Croatian nationalism. And this was, and of course in Bosnia, the United States was actually allied with Osama bin Laden in sending in Muslim fighters to kill the Serbs. But the media didn't report that. The media reported that the Serbs were horrible and were racist and so on. And it was rather the other way around. So the use of minorities has become a constant with U.S. imperialism. They find disgruntled minorities, and they're doing well. Let's find somebody who isn't happy with the system, and make a huge campaign about how they are victims of human rights violations. And so what we have to do is go bomb the country in order to protect their human rights, and or sanction it or whatever. And so Yugoslavia was really the guinea pig in experiment for this new wave of U.S. world domination. And Yugoslavia was a good target because it was independent socialist. It was not part of the Soviet bloc. It had broken away a long time ago. So it was there. It was not totally obedient to the Western command, and also it had been part of the non-aligned movement.
Mm-hmm.
And these were good reasons to destroy that country. And they made the villain of Serbia because Serbia was the center of it, and the Serbian desire, which was shared by many others, by the way, to keep the country together, was portrayed as conquest. I mean, this is crazy because the Serbian Milosevic at most was trying to keep the country together, but was ready for compromise. And keeping the country together was portrayed in the media as a program of conquest of the country, of his own country. And he was compared to Hitler, and so this incredible propaganda. And what is very significant is that this propaganda appealed especially to the left, and this brought the left, the so-called left in the West, into the imperialist project very strongly. And the Greens, who had started out as a peace party, actually in Germany, the foreign minister was a Green. And so the Greens have become a major war party, all in the name of protecting human rights. Human rights. And so
it's surreal. It's just surreal.
Well, and you see, the incredible thing is that people have bought this. They have believed this. They did this. And even today, there's a terrible anti-Serb propaganda in the world. They've made out Serbia as a villain. And, of course, the Chinese, you are very aware of that because their Chinese embassy was bombed by the United States in the war because China has been a friend to the Serbs and still is, in fact. But this is very much disapproved by the West. But the main purpose, I think, of all this was to revive NATO as an active force. The United States used this as an excuse to transform NATO from what was supposed to be a defense pact, which is always doubtful because the Soviet threat was a myth anyway. But the Soviet Union was not there, so what was NATO supposed to be? And so Yugoslavia was used as a pretext we need NATO to go out of its defense area in order to protect populations that are being oppressed by their own governments. Mm-hmm. And this gave a new life, a new horrible, aggressive life to NATO. And Yugoslavia did all of that. And it transformed the left into a war party, and it revived NATO as a world conquest tool of the United States.
Unbelievable. And also, they used depleted uranium, and now sections of Serbia are having, birth defects and miscarriages and cancers at the same rate as Nagasaki and Hiroshima, after the atomic bombing there. It's one of the most atrocious crimes against humanity and there are many. The West has committed many.
There's another I'd mention. Part of the breakup of Yugoslavia was that the northern parts, Slovenia and Croatia, were a bit richer than the south. and they have been part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and there was a huge propaganda thing coming from Germany and so on to support Croatian nationalism. And in Slovenia and Croatia, they were richer, and leaders got in power who thought, well, we'd be better off being part of rich Europe than being the poorest part of rich Europe than being the richest part of Yugoslavia. And so they led secession for these reasons. And now that Yugoslavia is broken up into these pieces, people are worse off in every single one of them, including the one in the European Union. It has been really bad for the whole population. And in some ways, the Serbs are doing better than the rest. Despite being demonized and all of that, somehow statistics show Serbia is not worse off than the rest of them. But it has been devastating for people in Bosnia because the war, which was absolutely promoted, the Bosnian War was totally promoted by Washington, and the people there, now they are never reconciled. The situation is terrible there, and none of those states, the little countries, they're all dependent. Whereas Yugoslavia had a certain independence, it was a country in the world. They're all dependent, and they're all worse off. The people are worse off in all of them.